How do you write a competitive NIH grant when everything is so uncertain? Of course, we are in February of 2025, and over the last several weeks, there has been a lot of uncertainty, a lot of upheaval, a lot of anxiety, a lot of unknowns about the future of NIH funding, what that's going to look like. And the effects are already being felt by individual faculty and within academic institutions. So let's talk about how to move forward in this moment. If you are new around here, my name is Sarah Dobson. I'm a research grant consultant, and my team and I help early career researchers get funded at NIH. So the very first thing that I want to say about this is that we are obviously currently in a moment of huge uncertainty about NIH and funding and indirect funds and all of that, right? That is what is going on in the current moment and all of the associated uncertainty around that. But the way that you handle uncertainty is similar no matter what that uncertainty looks like. And this is something that we talk about a lot in a group program that I run called K to R Essentials, where we are helping women faculty who have a career development award kind of move out of that career development award phase and into research project grant funding. And there's a lot of uncertainty in that period of time, in that career transition period. And so one of the most important things that we do in that program is talk about how to handle uncertainty. And so I wanted to bring some of that into the conversation today because it's relevant not only to uncertainty around career progress, but also uncertainty around grant funding, political climate, and how that impacts you, right? So it's all kind of the same idea when it comes to dealing with uncertainty. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot in the program, in the professional development program, is making sure that you have a sort of a point that you're navigating toward, that you know where you're headed, that you have a vision for where you are headed that can help you navigate the uncertainty. Because one of the things that happens is if you don't see the full picture, it can be hard to take the next step. And so what we try to do is help people identify that sort of long-term goal, that vision, the mission that they have for their scientific career, and help them recognize that they don't need to see the full path to get there. They just need to see the very next most obvious, most pragmatic step. And so that is my advice for you, is to get really clear on what your mission is as a scientist. What kind of impact do you want to make in the field? What benefit do you want to bring to the communities that you care about, that your research impacts, right? So when you think about the bigger picture and your mission and vision as a scientist, how does that sort of broaden your lens on away from the sort of immediate uncertainty and the anxiety of the current moment, right? It's about seeing the bigger picture, about understanding what your end game is, and understanding that you're playing the long game rather than the sort of immediate short-term, oh my God, what's going to happen scenario, right? So helping to identify what that long-term goal is, what that mission is for your career, will bring you a lot of clarity around what the next steps could be. And the one of the biggest purposes here is to help you again, see the bigger picture, but be more creative and be more nimble about how you move forward. So that's number one, is really understanding and getting clear on what your mission is, what the work is that you want to do, and how that is going to guide your decision making moving forward. The next thing is, and this goes back to sort of fundamental grantsmanship skills that I talk about all the time. They are still completely relevant in this current moment, right? And we are talking specifically about how to pursue, or how to continue to write competitive grants to NIH in this moment. And so a lot of these sort of foundational grantsmanship skills still very much apply. But I will also say that all of the foundational grantsmanship skills that I teach, the frameworks, the strategies, they are all relevant no matter where you are applying, right? So whether it's NIH, whether it's a private foundation, whether it's another funding entity, the grantsmanship skills are principle based, right? They aren't specific to a funder or a particular target. That's the way that I teach grant writing. Is you want to understand the principles and the strategies and the frameworks, and then you just apply those to different targets, right? To different funding agencies. And by and large, the work that I'm doing is applying that to NIH, and teaching people how to take those skills and frameworks and apply them to particular funding mechanisms. But again, those same frameworks and skills can be used anywhere. Okay. So one of the foundational grantsmanship skills that I teach that is still very important in this moment is to lead with your research and not the funding mechanism, right? So we've just talked about establishing your vision and your long-term goal for your research career, your program of research. And what you want to do is let that goal, let that program of research guide how you move forward. What is the most obvious next step? If we're talking about a sort of a broader scientific problem that you're chipping away at in your program of research, what is the most obvious next step that you need to take to continue to chip away at that problem and fill all the gaps along the way, right? And if you think about it that way, you're thinking about it in terms of what the research requires, and not what you require in terms of funding, right? A lot of the questions that I get are around, essentially, how can I game the system? How can I give myself the best chance by applying to a particular funding mechanism? And that shows up as, I heard that it's easier to get an R21 versus an R01, or I heard that it's easier to get an R01 and I shouldn't bother with an R21. And I want you to just forget all of that and focus on what your research is telling you needs to come next. Okay. And then based on that, figuring out which mechanism is going to best support that work. And so you're starting with your research, and then you're looking to the funding mechanism and making sure that it's a good fit for you and not the other way around. So you're not sort of pretzel twisting your idea to fit into a mechanism that might not make sense just because you think it's gonna get you there. And I think it's especially important to bring this up in this moment, because a lot of times with uncertainty comes panic. And when we make decisions based on panic, we end up getting ourselves in a lot of trouble. We can dig ourselves into a pretty deep hole pretty quickly. And so if you are focused on your vision, if you're focused on the long game, and you are letting that drive the research that you're doing, you are more likely to make smarter, more strategic decisions about the funding that you're going to go after and how you are going to spend your time writing those applications, right? So let the research lead, not the funding mechanism, okay? Number three, and this one, I'm going to be really careful about how I word this, and I recommend that for the most part, you have these conversations offline with the folks around you in your local communities, and you strategize and support each other in that way. So I'm going to be sort of deliberately vague in the way that I talk about this here, but the third point that I want to bring up here is that within NIH, under the current circumstances and political climate, it's important to be responsive to the purpose of the funding opportunity that you're applying to, while also being conscious of the broader political climate. And that might look like being careful about some of the descriptions that you use for your research. And I will also acknowledge that for some of you, this will be easier than for others. And in some cases, just based on the nature of your research, it might be very challenging, if not impossible, for you to pursue research at a federal funding agency in the current political moment, right? And so I've made other videos as part of this series this month talking about diversifying your funding portfolio, also talking about sort of mental health strategies, which I mean, I recommend that you watch the full series. But for you, if your research is under threat currently, it might be very challenging to be responsive to a funding opportunity and also kind of recognizing the political climate. And in that case, you might need to diversify your funding portfolio away from federal sources for the moment. While some of you may be able to be responsive with some modifications. Okay, that is all I'm going to say about this here. If you want to discuss this further, again, this would be something to do in your local networks, and it's also something that I'm happy to discuss with you in a more private setting. So if you're on my newsletter, you can reply to any one of the emails that I send there, and we can find a way to discuss this. So that's all I'm going to say about that. The last point that I want to make, and again, this is a foundational grantsmanship principle, just like the last two that I've discussed. Being responsive to the purpose of the funding opportunity is a foundational grantsmanship principle, as is lead with the research, not the funding mechanism. And this last one is also foundational, and that is about writing with your reviewers in mind. So what I mean by that is you want to make it as easy as possible for your reviewers to immediately grasp your research idea and what it is that you are trying to accomplish. And you want to do that. You want to frame your research strategically so that it gets in front of the reviewers who are most likely to immediately get on board. They know that this research matters. You don't have to try to convince them that this research matters. They have the same sort of viewpoint or outlook as you do. And part of that is sort of doing your homework about the peer review groups and making sure that you're framing your research in a way where it's most likely that it will end up in a study section that is already kind of on board with your subject matter area and understanding the importance of the research that you do. It's always harder when you are submitting your application to an audience who might not get it, and you have to spend a lot of time in your application to kind of bring them up to speed, to educate them on why it's important. And then once you've done that, then you can explain your idea, right? That is always more challenging. So of course, wherever possible, you want to frame your research in a way that it's going to be immediately understandable on the part of your reviewers, and that they already understand the importance of what you're doing. And the last thing I will say about this, given the current scenario, given the uncertainty, the anxiety, the upheaval, the chaos that is happening at the moment, people are distracted, right? People are overwhelmed, are distracted more so than usual. And so when I say make it easy, I mean make it as easy as possible. Make it so that your reviewers don't have to burn any calories reading your application. It's so simple to understand. And what that ends up doing is putting a lot of that work back on you to kind of get in your reviewer's head a little bit and understand what they need to know to connect the dots for them, to make those logical connections really simple, so that your reviewers aren't having to make those logical connections themselves. It is a lot of work on your part to do that, but the payoff is what I talked about earlier, right? It's reviewers immediately grasping what it is that you're trying to do and getting on board with your proposal. And again, this is something that I have been teaching for almost a decade at this point, but something that I have noticed certainly in the last few years is that the level of distraction is higher and higher, and it's even more important to simplify your application as much as possible, to make it easier for reviewers to understand and to get on board. And so just to recap, I want to remind you that a lot of what it takes to write a competitive NIH application in uncertain times is exactly the same as what it has always been. Of course, with a few exceptions or refinements, let's say. So I think now more than ever, it's crucial that you are clear on your vision. You're clear on what you are trying to do in the long term as a scientist, and what motivates you to do the work, because that excitement, that passion for the work comes through in your grant application. And now more than ever, it's important to sort of keep that flame alive as we deal with the uncertainty around us, right? So that's number one. Number two is, again, to be aware of the threats to some areas of research, and understand that as you are preparing an application, while also being responsive to the purpose of the grant application. And finally, it's to recognize that everybody is extra distracted and stressed at the moment, and their attention span is going to be dramatically reduced. And you as an applicant have to understand that, and have to be prepared to address that as best you can by making your application as simple and easy to read as possible. So if you found that helpful, you can always sign up for my free resource library. I have lots of grantsmanship tools and tutorials inside the free resource library. There's a link to that below this video. And again, those tools and tutorials are useful not just for NIH applications, but because they are principle-based, you can use those tools and tutorials to help you build up those grantsmanship skills that you can use for virtually any health research funding agency that you want to apply to. So again, you can find the link to that free resource library and sign up for free at the link below this video. All right, take care.